The millionaire who didn't believe in helping sees a girl sleeping on the sidewalk. Her answer to his question makes him cry. Before we start, I love seeing this community grow. Feel free to introduce yourself below. James Harrington scowled as his Mercedes navigated through downtown Boston's early morning traffic. At 62, he'd built Harrington Enterprises from nothing, amassing a fortune that rivaled some small nation's GDPs. The crisp October air couldn't penetrate his climate-controlled sanctuary, but something else had disturbed his carefully constructed world. "Sir, your 9 a.m. with the investors has been pushed to 10:30, his assistant's voice announced through the car's speakers. "Fine," James replied curtly, his attention caught by something outside the window. The car had stopped at a red light beside a small park, where a young girl huddled on a bench. She couldn't be more than 16, her blonde hair tangled and dirty, wearing clothes too thin for the autumn chill. She was attempting to read a tattered book while eating something from a paper bag. James felt a strange twinge, something between annoyance and, was it concern? He quickly dismissed the feeling. People ended up on the streets through their own poor choices or lack of ambition. He'd grown up poor in rural Maine, with parents who could barely keep food on the table. But he'd worked his way out. Anyone could. The light turned green and James's driver pulled away. "Circle back," James heard himself say, surprising even himself. "Sir?" his driver asked. "Go around the block. I want to stop at that park." Minutes later, James stood on the sidewalk, staring at the girl. Up close, he could see her clothes were worn but clean. Her face, though smudged with dirt, had a determined set to her jaw. "Don't you have somewhere to be?" James asked, his voice gruffer than intended. The girl looked up, green eyes assessing him without fear or expectation, unusual for someone in her position. Most homeless people he encountered immediately asked for money. "Everyone has somewhere to be," she replied calmly, "but sometimes where we are is exactly where we need to be." Something about her voice, educated and articulate, caught him off guard. "Shouldn't you be in school?" he pressed. "I learn more out here than I ever did in a classroom," she said, holding up her book, a worn copy of The Grapes of Wrath. "Life's education is more thorough, if less structured." James frowned. "How old are you?" 16, almost 17. "Where are your parents?" Her eyes clouded briefly. "My mom died 3 years ago, cancer. Dad's somewhere, probably Florida by now. And social services." She smiled ruefully. "I aged out of my last foster home a month ago. They don't really track you once you're gone." James knew that wasn't how the system worked. 16-year-olds didn't just age out, but something stopped him from calling her bluff. "What's your name?" he asked instead. Emma Thornton. "I'm James Harrington." She nodded, unsurprised. "I know who you are. Your picture was in Forbes last month. The man who never gives back." James stiffened. That damned article had painted him as heartless because he refused to establish a charitable foundation like his contemporaries. "They misquoted me," he said sharply. "Did they?" Emma asked, her gaze uncomfortably perceptive. "What's your philosophy on helping others, Mr. Harrington?" The question struck him as absurdly precocious, coming from a homeless teenager, but he found himself answering anyway. "I believe in self-reliance. Handouts create dependency." "And what about a hand up?" she asked. "Isn't there a difference?" Before James could respond, his phone rang. The investors had moved the meeting up again. "I have to go," he said abruptly. As he turned to leave, Emma called after him. "Sometimes the people who believe least in helping others are the ones who needed help the most once upon a time." James froze, those words hitting him like a physical blow. How could this girl possibly know about his past? About the night 45 years ago when he'd been just a hungry kid, when he'd... "What did you say?" he demanded, turning back. But Emma had already gathered her few belongings and was walking away. James couldn't focus during his investor meeting. Emma's words echoed in his mind, disrupting decades of carefully constructed certainty. His assistant Margaret noticed his distraction. "Are you feeling all right, Mr. Harrington?" she asked as they walked back to his office. "Fine," he snapped, then softened slightly. Margaret had been with him for 20 years. She deserved better. Just thinking about something. In his office, James stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston, He'd built his first development just 10 blocks from here, converting an abandoned warehouse into luxury apartments. Now he owned half the skyline, but instead of pride, he felt a peculiar emptiness. Emma's face kept appearing in his mind, alongside another face, his younger brother Michael, whom he hadn't seen in 30 years. At 5 p.m., when he should have been reviewing acquisition proposals, James found himself back at the park. Emma wasn't there. He circled the block twice before spotting her outside a public library as it was closing. "Mr. Harrington," she acknowledged, unsurprised by his return. "Did you forget something this morning?" "How did you know about me needing help?" he demanded. Emma tilted her head. "I didn't. I was speaking generally." James didn't believe her. "No one talks like that by accident." "Maybe I'm just observant," she replied. "Your suit costs more than most cars, but you wear old shoes that have been resold multiple times. People who've always been wealthy don't keep comfortable old shoes when they can buy new ones. They don't understand the value of something that's already molded to you." James looked down at his Oxford shoes, expensive when he'd bought them 15 years ago, but indeed resoled twice. He kept them because they were comfortable, a small rebellion against constant replacement. "That's a stretch," he said, but without conviction. "Is it?" Emma asked. "You also have a scar on your right hand that looks like a burn. And you were watching that construction worker this morning, the one fixing the bench. You were assessing his technique. People born to money don't notice craftsmanship in manual labor." James unconsciously touched the burn scar from his construction days. This girl didn't just observe, she analyzed. "Where are you staying?" he asked, changing the subject. "There's a shelter on Dawson Street, but they're usually full by 7 p.m. "And if they're full tonight?" she shrugged. "There's an all-night diner on 10th that lets me stay if I buy coffee every few hours. The waitress sometimes gives me leftover pie." Something twisted in James's chest, a feeling he'd long suppressed. Memories flooded back, himself at 17, sleeping in an unfinished office building, washing in gas station bathrooms, saving every penny for community college classes. "Come on," he said abruptly. "Where?" "I know a place that won't be full." 20 minutes later, they entered the lobby of the Harrington, his flagship hotel. The manager hurried over immediately. "Mr. Harrington, what a surprise. How can I help you?" James noted the manager's quick, disapproving glance at Emma's appearance. "Ms. Thornton will be staying in one of the executive suites tonight. Arrange it." "Of course, sir," the manager replied, professionalism masking his curiosity. As they waited for the room key, Emma whispered, "I don't need charity, Mr. Harrington." "It's not charity," he replied. "It's a business transaction. In exchange for the room, you'll tell me your story, the whole truth." Emma studied him carefully. "You think I'm lying about something? Everyone lies, especially people who can quote Steinbeck from memory." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Not a fan of literature, Mr. Harrington. Not a fan of manipulation. The room comes with dinner. We'll talk at 8 p.m. As James turned to leave, Emma called after him. "What if I'm not there at 8? He paused. "Then I'll know you were just another con artist, and I'll go back to believing exactly what I believed this morning." "And what's that?" James met her eyes directly. "That everyone is ultimately on their own, and that's exactly as it should be." At 8 p.m. sharp, James knocked on the door of the executive suite. He half expected Emma to be gone, having taken advantage of the room and free meal. When she opened the door, he was momentarily taken aback. She'd showered, her blonde hair now clean and falling in natural waves. The hotel had provided her with a simple white blouse and black pants, standard uniform items from the hotel staff closet, but they fit her well enough. Without the grime and tattered clothing, Emma looked like any normal teenager, except for her eyes. They still held that unsettling perceptiveness. "You look surprised," she said. "Did you think I'd run?" "The thought crossed my mind," James admitted, entering the suite. Room service had delivered dinner, steak for him, chicken pasta for her, and a chocolate cake that remained untouched. "I asked them to wait for you before eating," Emma explained, gesturing to the food. They sat across from each other at the small dining table. James noted that Emma handled the silverware with practiced ease, not the behavior of someone who'd spent much time on the streets. "Start talking," he said, cutting into his steak. And don't bother with the foster care story. 16-year-olds don't age out of the system. Emma's expression didn't change. You're right, I ran away. From what? My last foster home, the Ellis family in Cambridge. Why? Emma carefully twirled pasta around her fork. Mr. Ellis had wandering hands. Mrs. Ellis had a prescription drug habit. After 6 months, I decided the streets were safer. James had expected a tale of typical teenage rebellion, arguments over curfews and boyfriends. The matter-of-fact way she described abuse caught him off guard. Did you report them? To who? The same social worker who placed me there after I reported problems at the home before? The one who told me I was difficult and making things up for attention. Emma's composure cracked slightly. Adults believe other adults, Mr. Harrington, not kids without parents. James felt uncomfortable recognition stir within him. Hadn't he experienced the same as a child? When he'd tried to tell a teacher about the conditions at home, hadn't he been dismissed as exaggerating? How long have you been on your own? He asked. Almost 3 months. And before the Ellis family? 4 other foster homes in 3 years. Before that, I lived with my mum in Somerville. Tell me about her. A soft expression transformed Emma's face. Claire Thornton. She was an English professor at Boston University, specialized in American literature, hence the Steinbeck, she added with a small smile. She was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer when I was 12. She fought it for a year, but Emma trailed off. And your father? Emma's expression hardened. David Thornton, left when I was 8, said he wasn't cut out for family life. Last I heard, he was in Florida with his new wife and their baby. He signed away his parental rights after Mom died. So you became a ward of the state? Emma nodded. With no other relatives, at least none that wanted me. James studied her carefully. Her story sounded plausible, but something still felt off. You're well-spoken for someone who's been through so much instability. My mother was an English professor, Emma reminded him. Education was non-negotiable, even during chemo. And I read all the time. Libraries are free, warm, and nobody bothers you if you're quiet. James had spent countless hours in libraries for the same reasons as a young man. Another uncomfortable parallel. What do you want, Emma? He asked directly. Money? A permanent place to stay? College tuition? Emma set down her fork. I don't want anything from you, Mr. Harrington. Everyone wants something. Fine, I want to understand you. James laughed, genuinely surprised. Understand me? Why? Because you're a contradiction. You've built an empire, but you live alone in a penthouse meant for a family. You have more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes, but you won't give $1 to charity. You claim to believe everyone should fend for themselves, yet here you are providing me with a hotel suite and dinner. This isn't charity, James reminded her. It's a transaction. Keep telling yourself that, Emma replied. But I think something about me bothers you, something that challenges what you believe about yourself. James felt a flash of irritation. Don't psychoanalyze me, Miss Thornton. You're not qualified. Maybe not, Emma conceded, but I know what it's like to create stories that help us survive. Sometimes we tell those stories so often we forget they're not entirely true. James stared at her, unsettled by how accurately she'd pinpointed his discomfort. The carefully constructed narrative of his life, the self-made man who succeeded through determination alone, had served him well. It justified his wealth, his isolation, his refusal to help others. But there had been help along the way, hadn't there? Brief moments of unexpected kindness, the high school teacher who'd stayed late to help him prepare for college entrance exams, the elderly landlady who'd overlooked late rent during his first winter in Boston, his first boss in construction who'd taught him the business. You're making assumptions, James said finally. Am I wrong? Emma challenged. James didn't answer directly. It's getting late. We'll continue this tomorrow. Tomorrow? Emma raised an eyebrow. Are you extending our transaction? Consider it a multi-day contract, James replied, standing. I'll have clothes sent up for you in the morning. Don't leave the hotel. Am I a prisoner now? You're free to go any time, but if you stay, we might both learn something. Emma considered this. I'll stay, but I have a condition. You're not in a position to make conditions. Maybe not, she agreed, but I think you'll accept this one. Honesty for honesty. You get to ask me questions, but I get to ask you questions too. And we both have to answer truthfully. James hesitated. He never discussed his past or his private thoughts, not with anyone. But something about this strange, perceptive girl made him curious about what she might uncover. Fine, he said finally. But I reserve the right to end this arrangement at any time. As do I, Emma replied. As James turned to leave, Emma called after him, Mr. Harrington, thank you for dinner, and for not treating me like a charity case. James nodded curtly and left, trying to ignore the unfamiliar warmth her simple thanks had kindled. The following morning, James found himself distracted during his executive committee meeting. His thoughts kept drifting to Emma and their strange conversation. He'd instructed his assistant to send appropriate clothing to the hotel and to extend Emma's stay indefinitely. Mr. Harrington, his CFO prompted, breaking into his thoughts. Your thoughts on the South End acquisition? Proceed with the environmental assessment, James replied automatically, and have legal review the zoning regulations again. I don't want surprises. At lunch, James cancelled his usual reservation at his club and returned to the hotel. He found Emma in the lobby, dressed in simple jeans and a blue sweater, reading a book from the hotel's small library. I didn't expect you until evening, she said, closing her book. Change of plans. Have you eaten? Not yet. Good. We're going out. They walked 2 blocks to a small Italian restaurant. Once seated in a private corner booth, James studied Emma as she examined the menu. Order whatever you want, he said. I assume our conversation continues during lunch, Emma asked. Your turn to ask questions, I believe. Emma set down her menu. Where did you grow up? Maine, small town called Millbridge. Family. Parents both deceased. 1 younger brother. Are you close with your brother? James's expression tightened. We haven't spoken in 30 years. Why not? That's more than one question. Emma smiled slightly. Fair enough. Your turn. You said your mother was Claire Thornton, an English professor at Boston University. That's not a question. I had my assistant check. There's no record of a Claire Thornton teaching at BU in the last 20 years. Emma's smile faded. I never said she taught at BU for 20 years. She was an adjunct professor for 3 semesters before she got sick. Convenient. Not really. Adjuncts are basically academic temp workers. They don't get benefits, tenure, or apparently lasting records in university systems. James leaned forward. Who are you really, Emma? What do you want from me? I told you who I am. As for what I want, she paused. I want to understand why some people who overcome hardship become generous while others, like you, become harder. That's not a personal want, that's a philosophical question. Maybe understanding that is personal to me. Their food arrived, pasta carbonara for Emma, grilled salmon for James. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Why did you really help me? Emma finally asked. And don't say it was curiosity. James considered deflecting again, but remembered their agreement about honesty. You reminded me of someone, he admitted. Who? Myself, at your age, and, he hesitated, my brother, Michael. The one you haven't spoken to in 30 years. James nodded. What happened between you? James sighed. My turn to ask questions. You're avoiding. Yes, he acknowledged. I am. Emma studied him thoughtfully. Okay, ask your questions. How have you survived on your own, truthfully? Libraries during the day, shelters when I can get in, sometimes church basements. I worked under the table at a cafe for a few weeks, but the owner's wife got suspicious about my age and situation. Emma shrugged. I've been lucky. I met some other kids who taught me which places are safe, which to avoid. And money? I had some saved before I ran away. Sometimes I help tourists with directions, and they give me a few dollars. Occasionally I sell used books I find at library sales. She hesitated. Once I pawned a bracelet my mother gave me. I'm trying to save enough to buy it back. The vulnerability in that admission felt genuine to James. He'd sold his father's watch during his first winter in Boston, when heating bills had overwhelmed his meager savings. What's your plan, Emma? You can't live like this forever. I turn 17 in January. At 18, I can get my GED and apply for college. There are scholarships for students in my situation. That's more than a year away. Winter's coming. I'm aware of the seasons, Mr. Harrington. James, he corrected automatically, surprising himself. Emma smiled. James, then. My turn for questions? He nodded. Why don't you believe in helping others? The real reason. James stared out the restaurant window, watching people hurry past. How could he explain a philosophy formed through decades of experiences, disappointments and hard-won successes? I grew up poor, he began slowly. Not middle-class struggling, but genuinely poor. Father worked at a paper mill until it closed. Mother cleaned houses when she was well enough. He carefully avoided mentioning her alcoholism. We lived in a two-room house with unreliable heat and plumbing that failed every winter. That sounds difficult, Emma said quietly. It was educational, James countered. I learned early that no one was coming to save us. Not the government, not charities, not neighbors. The few times people did help, it came with strings attached, humiliation, obligations, expectations. Not all help comes with strings, doesn't it? Even if the giver doesn't explicitly demand something in return, there's always an unspoken expectation of gratitude, of acknowledgement that the helper is somehow morally superior. Emma considered this. Maybe. But isn't that a small price to pay if the help prevents suffering? Pride isn't a small price, James replied. For some, it's all they have. Is that why you don't give to charity? Pride? I don't give to charity because most charitable giving is inefficient and self-congratulatory. It treats symptoms, not causes. And you know this because... James hesitated, then decided to share something he rarely discussed. I studied non-profit management in college before switching to business and architecture. I saw how much money went to administration, fundraising, donor cultivation, all to make wealthy people feel better about themselves while barely denting actual problems. Emma looked genuinely surprised. I didn't expect that answer. The truth is rarely what people expect, James replied. That's enough questions for now. I have meetings this afternoon. As they walked back to the hotel, Emma asked, What happens now with me? It was a reasonable question. This strange arrangement couldn't continue indefinitely. You can stay at the hotel through the weekend, James decided. That gives us 3 more days to figure out a more permanent solution. A solution that doesn't involve social services? Emma asked cautiously. James should have insisted on contacting authorities. It was the responsible thing to do. Instead, he heard himself say, We'll explore alternatives. Emma smiled, her first genuine, unguarded smile since they'd met. It transformed her face, momentarily revealing the carefree teenager she should have been. Thank you, she said simply. James nodded, uncomfortable with her gratitude. I'll return this evening. Don't leave the hotel. As he walked back to his office, James wondered what exactly he was doing. Housing a runaway teenager without notifying authorities was legally questionable at best. And yet something about Emma's situation resonated with him deeply. Perhaps just this once, he could make an exception to his rule about helping others. By Friday evening, Emma had spent 3 nights at the Harrington. James had visited each day, their conversations growing increasingly personal. He found himself sharing stories he'd never told anyone, about his childhood in Maine, his struggles through college, the early days of building his business. In return, Emma told him about her mother's cancer battle, her favorite books, her dreams of becoming a writer. James still wasn't entirely convinced her story was true, but he'd stopped actively trying to disprove it. Whether or not every detail was accurate, her intelligence and resilience were genuine. Tonight he'd brought dinner to her suite, takeout from his favorite Chinese restaurant. They sat in the suite's living area, containers spread across the coffee table. I spoke with a lawyer today, James said, breaking their comfortable silence. About your situation. Emma froze, chopsticks halfway to her mouth. And? There are options. Emancipation is possible for minors in certain circumstances, though the process is complicated. Emancipation requires proving financial independence, Emma pointed out. I don't qualify. There are also private guardianship arrangements that wouldn't involve the foster system. Emma set down her food. Are you offering to be my guardian, James? The direct question caught him off guard. Was he? The idea seemed absurd on its face, a 62-year-old bachelor with no parenting experience, suddenly taking responsibility for a teenager. Yet the possibility had been forming in his mind for days. "I'm exploring options," he said carefully. "But yes, guardianship could be arranged if that's what we both decide is best." "Why would you do that?" Emma asked, her tone neutral but her eyes intense. James considered deflecting, but remembered their honesty agreement. "I'm not entirely sure," he admitted. "Perhaps because I see potential in you that shouldn't be wasted. Perhaps because I understand what it's like to be young and alone. Or perhaps because helping one person feels manageable, while helping many feels overwhelming." James raised an eyebrow. "Are you psychoanalyzing me again?" "Just thinking aloud," Emma replied with a small smile. "But I appreciate that you're considering options. Most people wouldn't bother." "I'm not most people." "Clearly." Emma hesitated, then asked, "What happened with your brother, James? You've avoided that question all week." James sighed. He'd known she would return to this. "It's complicated. I have time." James stood and walked to the window, gazing out at Boston's evening skyline. The lights of the city blurred slightly as memories surfaced. "Michael was 4 years younger than me," he began. "Our parents weren't equipped for raising children. Father worked when the mill was operating, drank when it wasn't. Mother had her own demons." Emma remained silent, waiting. "I practically raised Michael. Made sure he ate, got to school, had clothes that fit. When I left for college at 18, he was 14. I promised I'd send money, come back for him once I was established." "And did you?" "I tried. The first year was harder than I expected. Construction work during the day, classes at night, barely making rent. I sent what I could, called when possible. Then our father died, liver failure. Mother couldn't cope. Michael ended up in foster care." "Like me," Emma said softly. James nodded. "I wanted to take him, but I was 20, living in a studio apartment with roommates, barely surviving myself. The court wouldn't consider it." "That wasn't your fault." "No, but what came after was—" James's voice hardened. "I worked harder, moved up from laborer to foreman, started taking business classes. By the time Michael turned 18, I had my own small construction company. I offered him a job, an apartment, college tuition, everything I hadn't been able to give him before. He refused. Worse. He took the job, the apartment, the money for college. Then I discovered he was stealing from the company, selling materials from job sites, forging invoices. When I confronted him, he was unapologetic, said I owed him for abandoning him. Did you press charges? No, I fired him, cut him off financially. Told him to never contact me again unless he was ready to make amends. That was 30 years ago. And he never did? He tried, periodically, calls when he needed money, usually. Each time I hoped he'd changed, that he'd finally grown up. Each time it was just another scheme, another story about how the world had wronged him." James turned back to Emma. "The last attempt was 15 years ago. A sob story about a sick child, a daughter I didn't even know existed. Did you help?" "I sent money for the child's medical bills. Found out later there was no sick child. No child at all, just another con." Emma was quiet for a long moment. "That explains a lot about your worldview." "Does it? You try to help the person who should have been most deserving of your help, your brother, and he repeatedly betrays your trust. Of course you'd conclude that helping others is pointless." James hadn't considered it quite so directly before. Had Michael's betrayal really been the foundation of his philosophy about self-reliance? Or had it simply confirmed what he already believed, that dependency corrupted both the giver and the receiver? "It wasn't just Michael," James said. "Throughout my career, I've seen how dependency destroys initiative. Employees who are micromanaged never develop problem-solving skills. Companies that receive bailouts never learn fiscal responsibility. People who rely on others for solutions never discover their own strength." "But isn't there a difference between enabling dependency and providing opportunity?" Emma challenged. "Between a handout and a hand-up, as I asked that first day?" Before James could answer, his phone rang. The caller ID showed his security company. "Harrington," he answered. The news was brief but concerning. There had been a break-in at his penthouse. Nothing appeared stolen, but his home office had been thoroughly searched. "I need to go," he told Emma after ending the call. "There's been an incident at my home." Is everything okay? Appears to be. Just a security issue that needs addressing. He gathered his coat. We'll continue this conversation tomorrow. James, Emma called as he reached the door. Thank you for sharing about Michael. I know that wasn't easy. James nodded, uncomfortable with her gratitude. Get some rest, Emma. Tomorrow we'll make decisions about your future. As he rode the elevator down to the lobby, James realized how much he'd revealed to Emma in just a few days, things he'd never discussed with business associates he'd known for decades. What was it about this girl that bypassed his carefully constructed walls? And more troublingly, who would break into his penthouse but take nothing? What were they looking for? The security company had already notified police, who were waiting at his building. As his car pulled away from the hotel, James glanced back at the illuminated window of Emma's suite, wondering if the break-in and his unexpected house guest were somehow connected. Saturday morning arrived with rain lashing against the windows of James's penthouse. He'd spent a restless night after dealing with police and security. The break-in remained puzzling, nothing taken, but his files had been meticulously searched. The detectives suggested it might be corporate espionage, but James wasn't convinced. As he sipped his coffee, looking out at the grey cityscape, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Margaret, his assistant. It's Saturday, Margaret, he answered. Whatever it is can wait until Monday. I'm sorry to disturb you, sir, but this can't wait, Margaret replied, her usually calm voice tense. I've found something about Emma Thornton. James straightened. Go on. You asked me to verify her background discreetly. I couldn't find a Claire Thornton who matched her description, so I widened the search parameters. I found a Claire Wilson who taught at Boston University as an adjunct from 2019 to 2020. She died of breast cancer in April 2021. That aligns with Emma's story, James noted. Wilson could have been her maiden name. Yes, sir, but here's where it gets complicated. Claire Wilson had a daughter named Emma, born January 2008, which matches our Emma's age. But according to records, Emma Wilson was placed with her father, Michael Wilson, after her mother's death. Michael Wilson, James repeated, his mind racing. Not Michael Thornton. No, sir. Michael Wilson, and sir, I found a photograph. James's phone buzzed with an incoming message. He opened it to find a family photo, a woman who must be Claire, a teenage Emma, perhaps 13, and a man James hadn't seen in 30 years but recognized instantly, Michael, his brother. Sir, are you there? Margaret's voice seemed distant. Send me everything you have on Michael Wilson, James managed, and keep this confidential. After ending the call, James stared at the photo, emotions churning. Michael had changed his last name, not surprising given their history. But Emma. She was Michael's daughter, his niece. The girl he'd been housing, talking to, considering guardianship for, was his brother's child. And she had lied to him. Anger surged through him. Another con, just like her father. The coincidence of finding him was too great. She must have engineered their meeting, perhaps even the break-in, but why? What was she after? James grabbed his coat and headed for the hotel. When he knocked on Emma's door, it took longer than usual for her to answer. When she did, she was fully dressed but looked pale. James, she greeted him, stepping back to let him enter. I wasn't expecting you so early. Clearly, he replied coldly, remaining in the doorway. We need to talk, Emma. Or should I call you Emma Wilson? Her face drained of remaining color. You know, that you're Michael's daughter. Yes. That this whole thing has been a con. I'm figuring that out now. He entered the suite, closing the door behind him. Did he put you up to this? Emma sank onto the sofa. It's not what you think. Then explain it, quickly. My father didn't send me. He doesn't even know I'm here. You expect me to believe that? That it's pure coincidence you ended up outside my car window? No, Emma admitted. Not coincidence. I came looking for you, but not for the reasons you think. Enlighten me, James said icily. Emma took a deep breath. My mother died 3 years ago, just like I told you. After that, I went to live with my father in Florida. He had a new wife, Jennifer, and a baby on the way. They didn't want me there. So he abandoned you. Typical Michael. No, he tried in his way, but he's not. Stable. Some days he was my dad, caring and present. Other days he'd disappear, come home drunk, start fights with Jennifer. Emma's voice trembled slightly. When things got bad, he'd talk about you, his successful brother who abandoned him, who had everything, while we had nothing. He abandoned me, James corrected harshly, after I gave him every opportunity. That's not how he tells it, Emma said. In his version, you left him with alcoholic parents, then expected gratitude when you finally offered help with strings attached. And you believed him? I didn't know what to believe. That's why I came looking for you, to understand who was telling the truth. James scoffed. By lying to me? By pretending to be homeless? I didn't lie about being homeless, Emma said quietly. 3 months ago, Jennifer gave my father an ultimatum. Me or her and the baby. He chose them, drove me to the bus station, gave me $500, and said he couldn't be a father to me anymore. Despite his anger, James felt a stab of sympathy. It sounded exactly like something Michael would do. Why Boston? He asked. My mother lived here. I thought I might find distant relatives, former colleagues of hers, someone who might help. When that didn't work out, I remembered my father's stories about his brother, the real estate tycoon in Boston. So you tracked me down and created this elaborate scenario? Sleeping on a bench where I'd see you? No, Emma protested. I really was staying at shelters, trying to figure out what to do. I'd found your company website, knew what you looked like. When I saw your car that morning, I thought, I don't know what I thought. That it was a sign, maybe. And the philosophical homeless girl act, the literary references. Not an act. My mother really was an English professor, and I do read. The things I told you about myself were true, just not my last name or my connection to you. James paced the room, trying to process everything. And the break-in at my penthouse? Was that your doing? Emma looked genuinely confused. Break-in? What are you talking about? Before James could respond, his phone rang again. It was the detective handling the break-in case. Mr. Harrington, we've identified a suspect from security footage. The man disabled most cameras, but we got a partial image from a backup system. Who is it? James asked. We're not certain, but the height and build match a Michael Wilson who has priors for fraud and breaking and entering. We're preparing a warrant now. James felt cold certainty settle in his stomach. Thank you, Detective. Keep me informed. He ended the call and turned to Emma. Your father is in Boston. He broke into my penthouse last night. Emma's shock appeared genuine. That's impossible. He's in Florida. Apparently not. James showed her his phone screen with the blurry security image. The police are looking for him now. Emma stared at the image, her hands beginning to shake. I swear I didn't know. I haven't spoken to him since he left me at the bus station. What was he looking for? James demanded. What's his angle this time? I don't know, Emma insisted, tears forming in her eyes. Maybe he found out I was staying here. Maybe he followed me to Boston, but I didn't tell him anything, I swear. James wanted to believe her, but decades of disappointment with Michael made trust difficult. Pack your things, he said abruptly. You're sending me away, Emma said, her voice small but resigned. No, James replied, surprising himself. I'm taking you to my penthouse where security has been doubled. If Michael is looking for you, that's the safest place, and if he tries to come back, we'll be waiting for him. Emma looked up, confusion replacing fear. You're helping me? Even after finding out who I am? I'm protecting my interests, James corrected, unwilling to examine his true motivations. And you're going to tell me everything you know about what your father might be after. As they left the hotel, James wondered if he was making another mistake where his brother was concerned. But something about Emma's shock and fear rang true. Whatever game Michael was playing, it seemed his daughter might be as much a pawn as James himself. And somewhere beneath the layers of caution and cynicism built over decades, a small voice reminded James that regardless of her parentage, Emma was still the same perceptive, resilient girl who had challenged his worldview and made him question his long-held beliefs. She was also his niece, the family he didn't know he had. The security team at James's penthouse had been doubled, with guards stationed at every entrance. James instructed them to detain Michael Wilson if he appeared, then contact police immediately. Inside, Emma sat quietly on the living room sofa, taking in the expansive space with its floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist decor. "I have lived here long?" she asked, breaking the tense silence. 15 years, James replied curtly, pouring himself a scotch despite the early hour. "Though I'm rarely here except to sleep." The penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of Harrington Tower, offering panoramic views of Boston. Despite its size and obvious luxury, it felt impersonal, more like an upscale hotel suite than a home. No family photos adorned the walls, no personal mementos cluttered the surfaces. The only artwork was selected by a professional decorator to complement the sophisticated grey and blue color scheme. "It's beautiful," Emma said. "But it doesn't feel like you." James raised an eyebrow. "And what would feel like me?" "Books, for one thing. You mentioned studying architecture. I'd expect architectural models, blueprints, design books." She gestured around the pristine space. "This looks like a showroom, not somewhere you actually live." James felt a flicker of irritation at her assessment, mostly because it was accurate. The penthouse was a place to sleep and occasionally entertain business associates, not a home filled with personal touches. "I'm not here for decorating advice," he said sharply. "Tell me everything you know about your father's current situation." "Why would he break into my home?" Emma sighed, drawing her knees up to her chest, a gesture that made her look younger than her 16 years. "I don't know much about his current life. He changed after Mom died, started drinking more, became erratic. The last few months I lived with him, he was obsessed with money, always talking about schemes and opportunities, about what he was owed. Owed by whom? Everyone. His ex-employers, the government, you." Emma met his eyes directly. "He blamed you for a lot of his problems. Said you had millions while he struggled, that it wasn't fair since you came from the same place." "Life isn't fair," James replied coldly. "I made choices. He made choices. The results speak for themselves." That's what Mom always told him. A sad smile crossed Emma's face. She had no patience for his victim mentality. She'd say, "Michael, you can complain about the past or build a future, but you can't do both." James felt an unexpected surge of appreciation for Claire Wilson, this woman he'd never met who had apparently seen his brother clearly. "Your mother sounds wise." "She was." Emma's voice softened with grief. After she died, there was no one to counter his narratives, to challenge his thinking. He just spiraled, especially after Jennifer became pregnant. "And he never mentioned specific plans involving me, money he thought I owed him, documents he wanted?" Emma shook her head. "Not specifically, just general resentment." She hesitated. "Though about a month before he left me at the bus station, I overheard him arguing with someone on the phone about proof and original documents. He was drunk, so I didn't think much of it." James frowned, moving to his home office, where police had photographed the disturbance. The space had been meticulously searched, drawers left open, files rifled through, the false bottom of his desk drawer discovered and emptied. "What did he take?" Emma asked, following him. "That's what's strange. Nothing appears missing. My safe wasn't touched, though it contains cash and valuables. Whatever he was looking for, it wasn't simply items of obvious value." James surveyed the disturbed papers, thinking about what Michael might want after all these years. What proof or original documents could matter now? The answer hit him suddenly. "The mill," he murmured. "What mill?" Emma asked. "The paper mill in Millbridge, where our father worked." James began sorting through scattered files with new purpose. "It closed when I was 17, putting half the town out of work. 5 years ago, an environmental report found contamination in the groundwater near the old site, chemicals that caused a cluster of cancer cases in families who lived nearby." "Including your family?" James nodded grimly. "Our mother died of liver cancer when I was 25. Several neighbors developed similar cancers over the years." "And you have documents about this?" Emma asked, connecting the dots. "More than documents. I have proof the mill owners knew about the chemical dumping decades ago." James pulled out a worn folder labeled Millbridge Property. "When I was building my business, I tracked down and purchased several properties in my hometown, including our old house and the land around it. During renovation, workers found sealed company documents in the wall of a shed that had once belonged to a mill supervisor. Documents that prove negligence," Emma said, understanding dawning. That could be worth millions in a class action lawsuit. James opened the folder, quickly scanning its contents. The originals are in my attorney's vault, but I kept copies here. They're still here, which means Michael didn't find them. Or he found copies but needs the originals for a lawsuit. James looked at Emma with new respect. For a 16-year-old, she grasped legal implications quickly. The question is, James continued, how did Michael know about these documents? I've never made them public, never discussed them with anyone outside my legal team. Emma bit her lip, looking troubled. Maybe he doesn't know specifically about the documents. Maybe he just knows you own property in Millbridge and is desperate enough to think there might be something valuable there. Possibly. James replaced the folder, unconvinced. Something didn't add up. If Michael was just fishing for valuable information, why target the office so specifically? How would he even know where to look? James's phone rang, the security desk. Mr. Harrington, there's a situation in the lobby. A man claiming to be your brother is demanding to see you. He seems intoxicated. Police have been called. Keep him there. I'm coming down. James ended the call and turned to Emma. Your father's here. Fear flashed across her face. What are you going to do? Talk to him. Figure out what he wants. You stay here. No, Emma said firmly, standing. I'm coming with you. If this is about me, I should be there. James wanted to refuse, to protect her from whatever scene Michael might create. But he recognized the determined set of her jaw, the same expression he saw in the mirror when faced with opposition. Stay behind me, he conceded, and let me handle him. They took the private elevator to the lobby, where they found Michael restrained by 2 security guards. At 58, Michael Wilson still resembled the younger brother James remembered, though decades of hard living had taken their toll. His hair was grey and thinning, his face lined and ruddy. He wore jeans and a wrinkled button-down, both showing signs of wear. James, Michael called, spotting him, tell these goons to let me go. This is how you greet your only brother after 30 years. Breaking into my home warranted a cautious reception, James replied coldly. Then he saw Michael notice Emma half hidden behind him. Emma? Michael's bloodshot eyes widened in shock. What are you doing here with him? Hello, Dad, Emma said quietly, stepping forward. Michael's expression cycled rapidly through surprise, confusion, and suspicion. Did you set me up? Is that what this is? You two working together? Nobody set you up, Michael, James said evenly. Emma found me on her own after you abandoned her. What I want to know is why you're breaking into my home after 30 years of silence. Michael laughed bitterly. Abandoned her? That's what she told you? Ask her why Jennifer kicked her out. Ask what she did. Emma flinched as if struck. Dad, don't, she pleaded. Sir, the police are on their way, one of the security guards informed James. Michael's eyes darted to the front doors, panic replacing belligerence. James, you can't let them arrest me. I've got priors. I'll do serious time. You should have considered that before breaking in, James replied. I was desperate, Michael's voice cracked. The lawsuit deadline is next week. Without those documents, we get nothing. All those families, all those deaths for nothing. James froze. What lawsuit? The class action against Atlantic Paper. The lawyers found evidence of dumping, but they need the original inspection reports proving the company knew about the contamination before 1990. They said without them, the case falls apart. And you thought I had these reports? I know you do. Douglas Mercer told me before he died. James recognized the name, his mother's cousin who had worked as a clerk at the mill. How did you find Emma? James asked, changing tactics. Michael looked confused by the shift. Find her? I didn't. She ran away 3 months ago after you left me at a bus station with $500, Emma interrupted, anger coloring her voice. After you chose your new family over me. That's not how it happened, Michael protested, looking genuinely bewildered. You stole Jennifer's jewelry, her prescription medication. We caught you trying to pawn her grandmother's ring. When we confronted you, you threatened to hurt the baby. Jennifer was terrified. Emma's face flushed dark red. That's a lie. I never stole anything, never threatened anyone. You made that up to justify abandoning me. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. James studied both his brother and his niece, trying to discern the truth. Michael was a known liar, But Emma had also concealed her identity. Who was he supposed to believe? The answer came from an unexpected source. James's phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. Found police report from Miami-Dade County. Emma Wilson reported as runaway juvenile after incident involving theft and threats. Attached. James opened the attachment. A police report confirming Michael's version of events, including statements from Jennifer and a local pawn shop owner. He looked at Emma, who must have read the change in his expression. "It wasn't like that," she whispered, tears forming. "They were lying. They wanted to get rid of me." "Sir, police are entering the building," the security guard reported. James made a split-second decision. "Release him," he ordered the guards, "and tell the police there's been a misunderstanding. I invited my brother, but forgot to update the security list." The guards exchanged glances but followed instructions. Michael sagged as they released his arms, looking shocked at the unexpected reprieve. "We're going back upstairs," James told them both. "All of us. And then you're both going to tell me the complete truth. No more lies." As they entered the private elevator, the tension was thick enough to cut. Emma kept her eyes downcast, avoiding James's gaze. Michael stood as far from her as the elevator allowed, watching her warily. James positioned himself between them, wondering how he'd gone from solitary businessman to mediator of a family crisis in less than a week. The elevator doors closed, carrying the three estranged relatives upward, leaving James to wonder if the truth, when finally revealed, would unite them or drive them further apart. Upstairs in the penthouse, James poured himself another scotch and one for Michael, who accepted it with shaking hands. Emma sat alone on the sofa, her posture defensive. No one spoke for several long moments. "Start talking," James finally said to Michael. "Why are you really here?" Michael took a long swallow of scotch, then set the glass down. "It's like I said downstairs. There's a class action lawsuit against Atlantic Paper for the chemical contamination in Millbridge. Dozens of families affected. Cancer clusters, birth defects, respiratory problems. Our mother's death would qualify, along with 3 neighbors on our street alone. And you suddenly care about justice, after all these years?" James couldn't keep the skepticism from his voice. "I care about the settlement," Michael admitted bluntly. "I'm broke, James. No job, mounting medical bills, about to lose my house. The lawyers estimate each family could receive between $1 and $2 million depending on the case specifics." "So this is about money, as usual." Michael flushed. "Judge all you want from your penthouse, but yes, I need money. My drinking got worse after Claire died. I lost my job, then my license after a DUI. Jennifer's supporting us on a teacher's salary while I try to get disability for my liver disease." "Liver disease?" James echoed, caught off guard. "Stage 2 cirrhosis, plus elevated cancer markers. Doctors think it might be connected to the same contamination that killed Mom." Michael's hands trembled slightly. "The settlement could pay for treatments insurance won't cover." Despite his suspicion, James felt a flicker of sympathy. He'd assumed Michael's disheveled appearance was simply the result of alcoholism, not illness. "Hand these documents you think I have. How did you learn about them?" "Douglas Mercer contacted me last year before he died of pancreatic cancer. Said you'd bought property in Millbridge years ago, including our old house. During renovations, workers found a hidden compartment in the shed with inspection reports, proving Atlantic knew about the contamination as early as 1982, but continued operations until 1991 when they closed the plant." James nodded slowly. The story aligned with what had actually happened. "Douglas claimed you kept the originals," Michael continued. "The lawsuit needs them before the filing deadline next Friday. Why didn't you just ask me for them? Why break in?" Michael laughed bitterly. "Ask you? After 30 years of you hanging up whenever I called? The few times I got through, you made it clear you wanted nothing to do with me." "Because every call was about money," James countered. "Not every call," Michael said quietly. "I tried to reconnect when Claire was diagnosed, when Emma was born. You never gave me a chance." James remembered those calls, had dismissed them as more manipulation. Had he been wrong? "So instead of trying again, you broke into my home?" "I was desperate," Michael repeated. "The lawyers are dropping the case without those documents. I tried calling your office multiple times this month, but your assistant blocked me. Breaking in was a last resort." James turned to Emma, who had remained silent throughout this exchange. "And you? How much of your story was true?" Emma met his gaze, her expression a complex mixture of defiance and shame. "Most of it. My mother was Claire Wilson, a professor who died of breast cancer. I did live with my father and Jennifer in Florida, the rest." She trailed off. "The rest was manipulation," James finished. "You weren't abandoned, you were caught stealing and making threats." "I didn't threaten the baby," Emma insisted, tears forming. "I would never do that. But yes, I took Jennifer's things. She treated me like an intruder from the moment I arrived. Dad was drinking more, working less. We needed money. So you stole from your stepmother. I borrowed things I planned to return once I sold some of my mom's jewelry to cover Dad's part of the rent." Emma's voice hardened. "But Jennifer called the police, made it sound worse than it was. They believed her because she's an elementary school teacher, and I was just the troubled teenager from a previous marriage. And after that," James prompted, "they gave me an ultimatum: juvenile detention or leave. I chose to leave." Emma wiped away tears. "Dad did drive me to the bus station with $500, that part was true. I came to Boston to find Mum's colleagues first, hoping someone might help. When that didn't work out, I remembered Dad's stories about his millionaire brother. So you engineered our meeting?" Emma shook her head. "Not exactly. I knew what you looked like from news articles. I was actually staying at that park because it was near a shelter. When I saw your car, I recognized you. I didn't plan the meeting, but I didn't correct your assumptions either." James absorbed this, trying to separate truth from manipulation. Both Michael and Emma had lied, yet both stories contained elements of truth. The question was whether either deserved his help now. "The documents exist," he finally said. "The originals are in my attorney's vault, as I suspected. Copies are here in my office." Michael visibly sagged with relief. "Will you help us? Will you provide them for the lawsuit?" "I haven't decided," James replied coolly. "I need to verify your story and Emma's." "What's to verify?" Michael asked, frustration evident. "You have the documents. Families are suffering. Some have already died waiting for compensation. I need to be certain the lawsuit is legitimate and that the documents will be used properly." "People are dying, James." Michael's voice rose. "Our mother died. Mrs. Kalowski next door died. Her son has the same cancer now. How many more need to die while you decide if we're worthy of your help?" "This isn't about worthiness," James snapped. "It's about trust. You've both lied to me repeatedly. Why should I believe anything you say now?" An uncomfortable silence fell. Emma looked between the brothers, then spoke quietly. "Because despite everything, we're family. The only family any of us has left." The simple statement hit James harder than he expected. Family. He'd been without family for so long, he'd forgotten what it meant. The obligations, the complications, the connections that couldn't be severed even by decades of estrangement. "I need time to think," he said finally. "You can both stay here tonight. We'll figure this out in the morning." "James," Michael began, but James cut him off. "In the morning, Michael. Get some rest. You look like you need it." As James showed them to guest rooms on opposite sides of the penthouse, he wondered if he was making a terrible mistake letting them stay. But sending them away felt equally wrong. For the first time in decades, he found himself considering someone else's needs alongside his own, and it was an uncomfortable, unfamiliar feeling. In his own bedroom, James sat on the edge of his bed thinking about the day's revelations. His phone buzzed with a text from his attorney. "Received your inquiry about the Millbridge documents. Class action is legitimate. Atlantic paper trying to settle quickly and confidentially before more families join. Call me." So that part of Michael's story checked out. But could he trust his brother to use the settlement money responsibly? Would helping him now just enable more self-destruction? And what about Emma? Clearly troubled, definitely manipulative, but also intelligent and resourceful. Abandoned, if not in the way she'd claimed. Was she beyond help, or just beginning to make the poor choices that could define her adult life? For a man who'd spent decades avoiding complications and emotional entanglements, James suddenly found himself entangled in both. And the strangest part was, Despite the lies and manipulation, he didn't regret it as much as he should. Perhaps Emma had been right that first day. Sometimes the people who believe least in helping others are the ones who needed help the most once upon a time. The question was whether he was ready to become the person who offered that help, even knowing it might not be deserved, even knowing it might not work out. For the first time in years, James Harrington didn't have a clear answer. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear, the storm having passed during the night. James woke early, as was his habit, and found Emma already in the kitchen, awkwardly searching cabinets. "Looking for something?" he asked. She startled slightly. "Coffee. I thought I'd make breakfast as a peace offering, I guess." Peace offerings generally work better when you use your own resources, not those of the person you're appeasing, James pointed out, but without rancor. He moved to a cabinet and retrieved coffee beans and filters. "But the gesture is noted." They worked in silence for a few minutes, James grinding beans and setting up the coffee maker, while Emma found bread and eggs. "I'm sorry," she said finally, cracking eggs into a bowl, "for lying about who I was. Not for seeking you out, but for the deception." James studied her as she whisked the eggs with more focus than the task required. In the morning light, her resemblance to Michael at that age was striking. The same determined set of the jaw, the same furrow between the brows when concentrating. "Why did you really come looking for me?" he asked. "The whole truth this time." Emma set down the whisk, considering the question. Part of it was curiosity. "Dad talked about you so much, sometimes with anger, sometimes with a weird kind of pride. 'My brother, the millionaire,' he'd say. I wanted to know if you were really the villain in his stories, or if there was another side." "And what did you conclude?" "That you're both right and both wrong. That family is complicated." James nodded. It was a surprisingly mature assessment. "And the other part, beyond curiosity?" Emma looked uncomfortable. "I needed a place to go, someone who might care what happened to me." The simple admission contained such raw vulnerability that James had to look away. Despite her manipulation, despite her lies, she was still a teenager who had lost her mother and been rejected by her father. He knew exactly how that felt. "Your father is up," James noted, hearing movement down the hall. "Let's finish this conversation later." Michael entered the kitchen looking haggard but more sober than the day before. He nodded awkwardly to James, then noticed Emma. "You're cooking?" he asked, surprise evident. "Just eggs," Emma replied, her demeanor cooling noticeably. "Nothing complicated." An uncomfortable silence fell as all three recognized the dysfunction of their improvised family breakfast. James poured coffee for himself and Michael, then set out plates as Emma finished cooking. They ate without speaking for several minutes, until James broke the silence. "I've verified the lawsuit is legitimate," he said. "My attorney confirmed Atlantic Paper is trying to settle quickly before more families join." Michael looked up, hope dawning on his face. "So you'll help?" "I'll provide the documents," James clarified, "but there are conditions." "Of course there are," Michael muttered. "First, I'll handle the documents personally, deliver them directly to the lead attorney. No intermediaries." "Fine," Michael agreed readily. "Second, I want a written agreement regarding any settlement funds you receive. Half goes into a trust for your medical treatment, administered by a trustee I select. The other half goes into a college fund for Emma." "What?" Both Michael and Emma spoke simultaneously. "That's not fair," Michael protested. "I need that money to live on, to save my house." "Your medical treatments will be covered," James interrupted. "The rest is an investment in Emma's future." "I don't want his money," Emma said flatly. "It's not his money," James corrected. "It's compensation for your grandmother's death and your family's suffering. Your father will receive his share for medical care. Your share ensures you have options beyond running away or stealing." Emma looked away, unable to argue with his logic, but clearly uncomfortable. "If either of you disagrees with these terms, I'll still provide the documents to the attorneys," James continued. "But I'll establish a separate claim as property owner and direct any settlement funds to cancer research instead of to either of you." Michael stared at his brother, anger and resignation warring in his expression. "You haven't changed at all, have you? still controlling everything, still thinking you know what's best for everyone. Someone needs to think beyond immediate gratification, James replied evenly. The settlement won't solve your problems if you drink it away or lose it to poor decisions. Like I would. Like you have, repeatedly, for 40 years. Michael pushed his plate away, appetite gone. Fine, your conditions, as usual. James turned to Emma. And you? She looked between the two brothers, then nodded slowly. College fund, I can accept that. Good. James stood, clearing his plate. Now we have another matter to discuss. Emma's immediate future. What about it? Michael asked defensively. She's 16, she needs a legal guardian, a stable home, and to return to school. Michael shifted uncomfortably. Jennifer won't take her back, not after what happened. I'm not suggesting she return to Florida, James clarified. I'm suggesting she remain in Boston. Emma looked up sharply. With you? With appropriate arrangements, James amended. I've consulted an attorney about legal guardianship options. Given Michael's current health and financial situation, temporary guardianship could be arranged without a prolonged court battle, provided he consents. You want custody of my daughter? Michael asked incredulously. I want to ensure she has stability, education, and opportunities, James corrected. Something you're currently unable to provide. Michael opened his mouth to argue, then closed it, the fight visibly draining from him. You're right, he admitted quietly. I can't give her what she needs right now. Maybe I never could. Emma stared at her father, hurt and resignation mingling in her expression. This isn't permanent, James clarified. It's a temporary arrangement while you focus on your health and the lawsuit. Once your situation stabilizes, we can reassess. And where would I stay? Emma asked cautiously. Here? James hesitated. His penthouse, while spacious, was hardly equipped for a teenager. More importantly, his solitary lifestyle would require significant adjustment. Initially, yes, he decided. Long-term, we'd find a more suitable arrangement. Perhaps a residential program at a private school, with weekends and holidays here. Emma absorbed this, her expression unreadable. Do I have any say in this? Of course, James replied. This only works if you're committed to making it work. That means school, following rules, no stealing, no running away when things get difficult. I only stole because we needed money, Emma defended, and I ran because I had nowhere else to go. Now you'd have both resources and stability, James pointed out. The question is whether you want them enough to adjust your behavior. Emma looked between the two brothers, one who had abandoned her, one who was unexpectedly offering help, and nodded slowly. I want to try. Then it's settled, James said, more confidently than he felt. Michael, you'll stay until we can arrange for the document transfer tomorrow. Emma will remain here while we sort out guardianship and school enrollment. As Michael left to shower and Emma began clearing dishes, James wondered what had possessed him to propose such a drastic solution. For decades he'd structured his life around independence and self-reliance. Now he was voluntarily entangling himself in family obligations and responsibilities. Yet strangely, the decision felt right in a way few had in recent years. Perhaps it was time to reconsider his long-held philosophy about helping others. Perhaps, as Emma had suggested that first day, there was a meaningful difference between a handout and a hand-up. The rest of Sunday passed in awkward negotiation of shared space and tentative conversation. James contacted his attorney to begin guardianship paperwork. Michael called the class action attorneys to inform them the documents would be delivered the next day. Emma explored the penthouse, eventually settling in the spare room with a book from James's modest collection. By evening, an uneasy truce had formed between the three relatives. They weren't a family. Not yet, maybe not ever. But they were no longer strangers or adversaries. It was a start. As James prepared for bed that night, he realized this strange turn of events had awakened something he thought long buried, the capacity to care about someone beyond himself. It was uncomfortable, risky, and completely contrary to the philosophy he'd espoused for decades. It was also, he had to admit, the first time in years he'd felt truly alive. James and Michael sat in Sandra Chandler's office, watching the attorney examine the mill documents. Her eyes widened as she reviewed the evidence. Inspection reports from 1982, showing chemical contamination and internal memos ordering supervisors to ignore the findings. "These are exactly what we needed," she said, looking up with barely contained excitement. Atlantic's lawyers claimed they had no knowledge of contamination before 1995. "This proves otherwise." "Will it be enough for a settlement?" James asked. "More than enough. We can push for the maximum, up to $2 million per family." She looked between the brothers. "I expect Atlantic will settle quickly, rather than risk these becoming public. Resolution within 2 to 3 months." After signing the necessary papers, the brothers stood on the sidewalk outside, an awkward silence between them. "I should head back to Florida tomorrow," Michael finally said. "Jennifer's worried, and I have a doctor's appointment Thursday." James nodded. "I've booked your flight. We'll finalize Emma's guardianship papers this afternoon." "You're really going to take care of her?" Michael asked, disbelief coloring his voice. "Someone needs to," James replied simply. Michael looked away, shame evident in his posture. "I tried, you know, after Claire died. I really did try." For the first time in decades, James saw his brother clearly. Not the manipulator he'd imagined, but a broken man who'd made too many poor choices. "I know you tried," James admitted quietly. "Some handle adversity better than others." "Like you," Michael said without bitterness. "You always were the strong one." "Strength isn't just about self-reliance," James replied. "Sometimes it's about knowing when to accept help or offer it." Michael studied him, a flicker of their old connection briefly visible. "When did you get so philosophical?" "Recent development," James said with a small smile. "Homeless teenagers' influence." At the penthouse, Emma was organizing her few possessions in what would now be her room. She looked up anxiously as they entered. "Did it work?" she asked. "Yes," James confirmed. "Your father returns to Florida tomorrow, and we need to discuss your arrangements." Emma tensed. "You still want me to stay, even after everything?" "I'm becoming your legal guardian until you're 18, James stated, "if that's what you want." She looked to her father, who nodded awkwardly. "It's for the best, Em. James can give you what I can't right now." "Will I see you again?" she asked quietly. Michael hesitated. "Of course, once things improve, it'll be different, I promise." Emma's guarded expression told James she'd heard such promises before, and had learned not to believe them. The morning of Michael's departure was quiet and strained. Emma hugged her father briefly at the door, her body stiff with unresolved emotions. "I'll call when I land," Michael promised, his voice rough. "Okay," Emma replied, not meeting his eyes. After he left, Emma retreated to her room. James gave her space, understanding the complexity of her feelings. By afternoon, the guardianship papers were filed, and James faced a new reality. He was responsible for a teenager he barely knew. The first week brought countless adjustments. James hired a decorator to transform the spare room into a proper bedroom for Emma. They visited Brighton Academy, an exclusive private school where Emma would start the following Monday. Shopping for school supplies and appropriate clothing became an unexpected challenge. James knew nothing about teenage preferences, and Emma was reluctant to ask for anything. "Just pick what you need," he told her, at an upscale department store. "I don't want to take advantage," she replied quietly. "It's not taking advantage when I'm offering," James said. "This is part of my responsibility as your guardian." Emma studied him thoughtfully. "You really believe that, don't you? That you're responsible for me now?" "I signed papers saying exactly that," James replied dryly. "Papers don't make people care," Emma observed. The simple truth of her statement caught James off guard. When had this arrangement shifted from obligation to genuine concern? By the second week, they'd established tentative routines. James adjusted his schedule to have breakfast with Emma before she left for school. Margaret arranged for a car service to transport her safely. Emma surprised James by volunteering to cook dinner several nights, skills she'd learned from her mother. One evening, as they ate pasta Emma had prepared, James noticed her watching him expectantly. "It's excellent," he said, realizing she wanted his approval. "Your mother taught you well," Emma smiled slightly. "She believed everyone should know basic cooking, said it was the difference between surviving and living." "She sounds remarkable." "She was." Emma hesitated. "I miss her every day." James nodded, understanding loss in a way few could. That never fully goes away. But eventually the missing becomes part of who you are, rather than something that consumes you. Emma's eyes widened slightly. That's exactly how it feels now, like she's built into me somehow. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, James found himself standing in the doorway of her room, watching her sleep. The fierce protectiveness he felt surprised him. Somehow, in just a few weeks, this complicated, intelligent girl had bypassed decades of carefully constructed defenses. James realized he'd been wrong all those years. Helping others wasn't weakness. Sometimes it was the only strength that mattered. 3 months later, James stood at his office window, watching snow fall gently over Boston. His phone buzzed. Sandra Chandler. "It's done," she announced. "Atlantic settled for the maximum. The paperwork will be ready tomorrow." After ending the call, James found Emma in the library they'd created from an unused sitting room. She looked up from her homework, immediately reading his expression. "The settlement came through," he nodded. "Your father's medical trust will be established next week. Your college fund shortly after. Have you told him?" "I'll call tonight." James hesitated. "He's doing better. The new treatments are helping." Emma nodded, relief briefly visible before her walls went back up. Michael had called sporadically these past months, each conversation a little less awkward than the last. "Your semester grades arrived," James said, changing subjects. "Straight A's. I'm proud of you." Emma's smile was small but genuine. "Thanks to you. For everything." That evening they visited the community center, where James had recently established a foundation providing educational resources for underprivileged teens. The Thornton Harrington Foundation, named for both sides of Emma's family, had become his unexpected passion project. "Mr. Harrington," Carlos, a 14-year-old regular, waved enthusiastically, "we finished the robotics project." As James examined their creation, Emma helped younger children with reading. Watching her, James felt a warmth that had become familiar these past months. Later, walking home through light snow, Emma asked, "Do you ever regret it, taking me in?" "Never," James replied without hesitation. "It's been challenging, occasionally frustrating, but never regrettable." "Even though I lied to you at the beginning?" "Sometimes people lie because the truth is too painful to share," James said. "You needed help but couldn't ask directly." Emma considered this. "You've changed your philosophy about helping others." "I've refined it," James corrected. "I still believe in self-reliance, but I understand now that everyone needs help sometimes. The key is offering the right kind of help, the kind that empowers rather than enables." "A hand up, not a handout," Emma quoted from their first meeting. "Exactly." As they reached their building, Emma stopped suddenly. "That day you saw me on the bench, what made you stop? You didn't believe in helping strangers then." James considered carefully, remembering that October morning that had changed everything. "Something in your eyes," he finally said. "Not desperation or expectation, but determination. You reminded me of myself at your age, and what I might have become if someone had offered me the right kind of help when I needed it most." Emma nodded, understanding. As they entered their home, for it was truly home now to both of them, James realized that in helping Emma he had finally helped himself. The millionaire who didn't believe in helping others had discovered that sometimes extending a hand was the surest way to heal one's own heart.